A cruel joke in court becomes the spark that ignites a reckoning. When two racist cops mock a disheveled black homeless man in a packed courtroom, they think it's just another day flaunting their badges. What they don't know: this man isn't homeless. He's FBI Special Agent Marcus Williams, deep undercover investigating police corruption. And in the next 5 minutes, everything these officers have built starts to crumble beneath them. This is a story of prejudice, power, and the kind of justice that doesn't whisper. It roars. Stick around, because the twist? You won't believe it until you see it. Let us know where you're watching from and what time you found this. We read every single comment. Detroit, Michigan, had always been a city of stark contrasts. Gleaming corporate towers casting shadows over neighborhoods struggling to breathe. The courthouse downtown stood as a monument to this divide, granite columns and marble halls speaking of justice, while whispers of corruption echoed beneath. Agent Marcus Williams arrived at the courthouse, looking nothing like himself. At 42, he usually carried himself with quiet confidence, shoulders back, eyes steady. But today, after 6 months undercover as Mike Watson, homelessness had been his disguise. Tattered clothes, unkempt beard, and a hunched posture that made officers dismiss him at a glance. What they couldn't see was the keen intelligence behind his bloodshot eyes that missed nothing, especially not the patterns of abuse he'd been documenting. People thought they could get away with anything in front of a homeless man. This courthouse, with its imposing facade and worn interior, had seen generations of justice and injustice flow through its halls. Marcus had walked these streets for over 2 decades, first as a beat cop in his early 20s, then as a detective who refused the unspoken rules of looking the other way. Now, as one of the FBI's top undercover specialists, he was closing in on a corruption network that reached from patrol officers all the way to the department's highest ranks. Some folks still couldn't get used to black agents having that kind of authority. Marcus knew the price of pursuing justice in a broken system. They didn't just threaten you. They tried to make you invisible. As he shuffled through the security checkpoint, guards barely glanced his way, some even snickering. Marcus kept his head down, mind already focused on the morning's arraignment. It was supposed to be routine. A drug possession case, evidence planted by officers he was investigating. But his instincts, those finely tuned veterans of countless operations, prickled with warning. Something about this morning felt different. The clerk outside the courtroom gave him a dismissive glance. "Keep moving, buddy." Officers Delaney and Riggs were already inside. Marcus paused. Ryan Delaney and Steve Riggs, the worst of the precinct. Marcus had been tracking them for months. Marcus felt his jaw tighten beneath his fake beard. Every cop in Detroit knew Delaney and Riggs, a toxic partnership built on intimidation, brutality, and unchecked authority. Delaney, mid-40s, cropped blonde hair, third-generation cop, and untouchable, despite a file thick with civilian complaints. Riggs, younger but equally dangerous, followed Delaney's lead with eager cruelty. The problem was, those complaints never stuck. Harassment, excessive force, racial profiling, always swept away by the blue wall of silence. Marcus had read their names too many times in reports that reeked of abuse. He shuffled into the courtroom quietly, staying in character, slouching. Against the back wall, the young man they'd arrested sat with his public defender, eyes hollow with defeat. Delaney and Riggs stood near the prosecution table, laughing about something. They didn't even notice Marcus enter. "Let's get this show on the road," Delaney barked toward the clerk. "Some of us have real work to do once we're done with this waste of time." Marcus shuffled closer, intentionally bumping against a chair. Delaney turned and stared, disgust flashing across his face. "Who let this garbage in?" he muttered to Riggs. "Probably looking for somewhere warm to sleep," Riggs snickered. "Hey, buddy, the shelter's 3 blocks down." Marcus didn't answer, just moved toward an empty bench, keeping his head lowered. "I'm talking to you, homeless," Delaney growled, striding over. "This isn't a flophouse." The room was mostly empty, just a few early arriving clerks, the public, defender, and his client. Delaney, clearly irritated that someone like Marcus would dare exist in his presence, stepped directly into his path. "I said move along," Delaney snapped. And then it happened. A sharp shove sent Marcus stumbling backwards, knocking into the wooden bench behind him. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker in response. Marcus didn't react immediately. Slowly, he raised his head, locking eyes with the officer who had just put hands on him. Delaney stepped back, almost surprised by his own action, but not remotely ashamed. Riggs moved closer, hand casually resting on his holster. "Your kind needs to learn about respect," Delaney muttered. Someone in the back whispered, "Jesus, was that necessary?" Another voice, "Should we say something?" But Marcus's gaze never left Delaney. 6 months of documentation, evidence collection, and observation had led to this moment. Delaney remained completely oblivious to the trap he'd just sprung for himself. "I don't care who you think you are or what sob story you've got," Delaney continued. "You stink up my courtroom, you deal with me." Marcus stepped forward, then again. The silence tightened, like a rope. The public defender whispered, "Officers, please, there's no need." But Delaney wasn't listening. Riggs smirked, arms crossed, enjoying the show. And then Marcus spoke, calmly but with unmistakable authority. "Is this how Detroit's finest treats citizens exercising their right to attend public proceedings, Officer Delaney?" The color drained from the public defender's face. A clerk dropped. Her pen. Delaney blinked. "What are you talking about?" Marcus stepped into better light, stance straightening imperceptibly. Nobody breathed. Delaney stood like a statue, uncertainty creeping into his expression as something changed in the room's atmosphere. He blinked twice. For the first time in years, he was unsure. Marcus clasped his hands behind his back, military style. He let the silence weigh down. Even Riggs, still standing near his partner, looked like he was holding his breath. One moment can change everything. What would you do if the room turned against you? Without warning. Share your reaction below. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. "Officer Delaney," Marcus finally said, voice firm and clear. "Did you just assault me in this courtroom?" "I moved a vagrant who doesn't belong here," he muttered defensively. "That is not what I asked. Did you physically assault me? Yes or no?" Someone at the back of the courtroom had already pulled out their phone. Cameras were rolling. "You were causing a disruption," Delaney tried again. "You thought I was beneath your notice," Marcus said quietly. "You thought I was invisible." "You're twisting this into something it's not," Delaney snapped, looking around for support. "I'm not twisting anything. You assaulted a citizen unprovoked in a public courtroom because you made assumptions about who and what I am." Delaney glanced at Riggs, but even his partner had taken a step back, suddenly focused on straightening his uniform. "If I were a clean-cut white man in a suit, would you have put your hands on me, Officer Delaney?" Marcus asked. Delaney said nothing. His silence was the loudest admission in the room. "I'll take that as a no. Now you've compounded that assault with an utter failure to maintain professional conduct." Delaney's face reddened. "I was doing my job. That kid?" He pointed toward the defendant, a thin, nervous black teenager who'd been silently watching the confrontation unfold. "That's enough," Marcus cut him off. "You do not get to justify assault by invoking duty. That's not how the law works, and you know it. If someone crossed a line they couldn't take back, would you call them out or let the world decide?" Drop your answer in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. Marcus turned to the clerk, his tone crisp. "I'd like to speak with the presiding judge immediately." "Regarding what, sir?" the clerk asked, suddenly attentive. "Please inform the judge that Officer Ryan Delaney has physically assaulted a federal agent in the performance of his duties." Delaney took a step back, finally understanding that the air around him was shifting fast. This wasn't going to disappear with a nudge from the union or a captain's blind eye. Not this time. Marcus glanced at the bailiff. "Officer, is this courtroom under video surveillance?" "Yes, sir," he replied immediately, voice taut. "Full coverage." "Good. Then the record will reflect visual evidence of everything that just occurred." Delaney's eyes flicked toward the corners of the ceiling where small red recording lights blinked silently back at him. That was when his expression truly changed. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was scared. "Look, I didn't mean—" he began again, but Marcus raised a single hand and stopped him cold. "You've had years of not meaning it," he said. "I've read your files. I've seen the complaints. I've watched them disappear. But here's what's different today, officer. This happened to the wrong person. At the wrong time. In the wrong place." Delaney opened his mouth again. But Marcus didn't let him continue. "I have spent months documenting how men like you mistake intimidation for law enforcement, mistake fear for respect, and mistake silence for consent. Not today." He stood straighter, shoulders squaring. "In accordance with my authority as a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, when the tide starts turning, do you stand firmer or back down? What would you do if power shifted? Your way? Let us know. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. I am placing you under preliminary investigation for civil rights violations under Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Code," Marcus announced. The gasp from the public defender was audible. Marcus turned to the bailiff. "Officer, please secure Officer Delaney's weapon and badge temporarily. He's still a sworn officer, so treat him with appropriate professional courtesy. But he is not to leave this room." Delaney's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious," he cried, chest rising with disbelief. "This is completely—" "And yet," Marcus said quietly, his eyes unblinking, "you didn't hesitate to put your hands on me." Delaney looked around wildly, but no one stepped forward. No allies, no defense, just the slow tightening of the noose he'd tied for himself. The sound of the judge's chamber door opening echoed through the suddenly silent room. The bailiff stood near Delaney, hand resting lightly on his belt. Not threatening, but clearly ready. Delaney stood rigid, face flushed red, jaw tight, and fists clenched at his sides like he was holding back a storm of rage. Marcus remained standing near the bench, his gaze fixed on Delaney like a steel rod. He didn't blink, didn't soften. He gave him no escape hatch, no space to pivot into denial. "You should know," Marcus continued, pulling out his FBI credentials, "that your actions today aren't isolated incidents. They're the final pieces of a 6-month investigation into systemic misconduct within your precinct. What you just did? It's on camera, witnessed, and now part of federal record." "Agent Williams," came a voice from the doorway. It was Judge Harmon, a stern-faced woman who'd entered quietly during the confrontation. "What's happening in my courtroom?" Marcus turned his gaze slowly toward her. "I'll explain momentarily, Your Honor. But first, I want to address what just occurred, because what happened in this room is no longer a matter of courtroom decorum. It's a matter of law, process, and public trust." He looked toward the few witnesses present. "You all witnessed an on-duty officer physically assault someone he perceived as homeless, and therefore beneath his notice. You heard his words. You saw his actions. I want you to record that. I want you to remember it. Because if we allow those with badges to selectively apply the law based on appearance or status, then we are no longer in a democracy. We are in something much darker." The room was dead silent. Even the young defendant sat motionless, eyes wide. Delaney scoffed suddenly, unable to help himself. "Are you really going to turn this into some kind of social justice lecture?" Marcus slowly turned back to him. "Is that what you think this is, Officer Delaney? A lecture?" He stepped closer, voice lowered so only those nearby could hear, though the courtroom's acoustics carried every word. "You've been protected for a long time, haven't you? I've seen officers like you before. The kind who walks into rooms already assuming everyone in it is beneath you. The kind who says, 'I didn't know,' when they mean, 'I didn't care.'" Delaney's eyes flicked nervously toward Riggs, but his partner had stepped away, trying to make himself invisible. "Let me tell you what's about to happen," Marcus continued. "Internal Affairs is being notified. I will personally be submitting my undercover findings to the U.S. Attorney's Office before noon. The footage of this incident will join a substantial file of evidence we've been building for months." Delaney's mouth opened. "You're destroying my career over a misunderstanding?" "No, officer," Marcus said. "You destroyed your career the moment you decided the law only protected some people." There it was, sharp and final. Delaney shifted, on his feet, glancing at the teenager he'd arrested. The boy was watching him now, not in fear, not anymore, but with something Delaney couldn't quite recognize. Pity. The same look Delaney had seen in the eyes of countless people he'd handcuffed. Over the years. "I've served this city for 15 years, Delaney said, louder now, almost pleading. "I've risked my life on these streets. I've faced things you can't imagine. And now you're going to throw me to the wolves because I made one mistake." Marcus turned, walking toward Judge Harmon. "I'm not throwing you to the wolves, officer," he said calmly. "I'm holding you to the oath you took. Today, your badge doesn't shield you. It holds you accountable." He showed his credentials to the judge, who examined them carefully before nodding. "This court will recess," she announced. "The arraignment for the defendant will be continued tomorrow with different officers present. The arresting officers have compromised the integrity of this proceeding." The public defender stood, adjusting his tie nervously. "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Harmon nodded. "Take your client out through the side exit. Ensure his safe departure." The boy stood, glancing back once at Delaney as he walked out. His face was unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. Less hunched, less defeated. Delaney, meanwhile, had gone quiet. His eyes no longer burned with anger. They darted around, calculating, waiting. Marcus watched him like one might study a cornered predator. Then he turned to the bailiff. "Please escort Officer Delaney to the conference room. I'll be contacting his supervising officer and the FBI field office. This matter is now a formal federal investigation." Delaney didn't resist, but his jaw was locked so tightly you could hear the muscles grind as the bailiff gently guided him toward the door. As he passed Marcus, Delaney muttered just loud enough to hear, "You think you've won, don't you?" Marcus didn't look at him. He just whispered, "I think for once, the right person is being held accountable. Boo, what would you do if the whole room watched you bring someone to justice? Stay strong or show mercy? Let's talk about it. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. Agent Williams, the bailiff said cautiously, holding out his phone. The police chief is asking to speak with you. He's requesting that you consider handling this internally. Department discipline instead of federal charges. Marcus didn't take the phone. He stared at it like it was a weapon. Silent, but heavy. Tell the chief I don't serve politics. I serve justice. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before the bailiff nodded. Yes, sir, he said, placing the phone back in his pocket without another word. Someone in the gallery murmured, he just told the chief no. Another whispered, about time. The power in the room shifted again. But this time, it didn't roar. It hummed. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, just long enough to feel the weight of the moment. When he opened them again, they were clear, focused, unshakable. Somewhere deep, down, he knew this would cost him. In political capital, in relationships within law enforcement, maybe in career advancement yet to come. But he also knew the cost of looking the other way, and he wasn't paying it anymore. He glanced at Riggs, who stood frozen by the prosecution table. Officer Riggs, Marcus said quietly, you have a choice to make right now. Continue down your partner's path, or be part of the solution. Riggs swallowed hard. I didn't touch you. No, Marcus agreed, but you've been Delaney's shadow for 3 years. The question is, are you also his conscience? In that moment, surrounded by witnesses, cameras, and the weight of inevitable consequences, Riggs faced the hardest decision of his career. Marcus pulled out his secure FBI phone, something he'd kept hidden throughout his undercover operation. He dialed directly to the special agent in charge of the Detroit field office. This is Agent Williams. Operation Blue Shield has been compromised. I need a full team at the downtown courthouse immediately. He paused, then added, and inform Justice Department, we'll need prosecutors from the Civil Rights Division. The bailiff straightened. Judge Harmon, still present, slowly took her seat at the bench. The few remaining witnesses went completely still. No one spoke. They just watched history unfold in real time. Delaney, still flanked by the bailiff, let out a bitter, breathless laugh. You're serious? You've been watching us for months? Playing homeless to spy on cops doing their jobs? Not spy, Marcus replied, lowering his phone. Investigate, and not cops doing their jobs, cops betraying their badges. He stood calmly. There's a difference. Delaney's face twisted. You have no idea what it's like out there. The animals we deal with. I spent 12 years as a police officer before joining the Bureau. Marcus cut him off. Don't tell me what it's like out there. The difference is, I never forgot who I was protecting and serving. Riggs stepped forward suddenly. I want immunity. The room went silent. From what? Marcus asked, though he already knew. If I tell you everything about the kickbacks, the planted evidence, the coordination between Delaney and the narcotics unit, I want protection. Delaney lunged toward his partner, but the bailiff caught him. You rat bastard, he snarled. Marcus faced Riggs directly. I don't have the authority to promise immunity, but cooperation is always noted by prosecutors. Riggs nodded slowly. Then I want to cooperate, fully. Outside, sirens began to rise in the distance. Not urgent, not chaotic, just steady, on schedule. The cavalry was coming, but the battle was already won. Marcus looked at the young defendant's empty chair, thinking of how many others had sat there, victims of a corrupted system. Then he turned to Judge Harmon. Your Honor, I believe we're about to uncover evidence that will affect hundreds of cases that have come through your courtroom. The judge's expression was grave. Then we have work to do, Agent Williams. A lot of work. 4 FBI agents entered the courtroom in dark suits, badges visible, their presence transforming the space instantly. They didn't ask questions. Their briefing had prepared them for exactly this scenario. Marcus removed his ragged coat and fake beard for the first time in months, revealing the man beneath the disguise. He handed the external hard drive containing 6 months of evidence to the lead agent. The investigation expands today, he said firmly. We've got officers Delaney and Riggs, but the network extends throughout the precinct and potentially into the prosecutor's office. Delaney was handcuffed formally now, his eyes burning with hatred as he stared at Marcus. This won't stick, he hissed. You don't know who you're messing with. Actually, Marcus replied, that's exactly what I know. He turned to the lead agent. Check the external hard drive first. There's footage of Officer Delaney meeting with Lieutenant Phillips on March 3rd. Evidence transfer, cash payment, explicit discussion of tampering. Riggs stood nearby, already speaking quietly with another agent, outlining names, dates, and operations. The dominoes were falling, and they would reach higher than anyone in the room had initially imagined. What about the kid? Riggs asked, suddenly looking up from his conversation. The one we arrested? He was clean. Delaney planted that stuff on him. Marcus nodded. We know. That case will be dismissed by end of day, along with potentially dozens more. Delaney was let out without further resistance, his badge now evidence in a case that would eventually implicate 18 officers and 2 assistant district attorneys. His name would no longer be a shield, but a case number in federal court. The courtroom stayed quiet long after they were gone. Not stunned anymore, sobered. The system had been exposed, not by a dramatic raid or a shooting, but by one man willing to become invisible to see the truth. Marcus gathered his few belongings, the items that had comprised his homeless identity for half a year. Judge Harmon approached him as he prepared to leave. How many? She asked quietly. How many cases will we need to review? Hundreds, Marcus answered honestly. This goes back years. She nodded, the weight of it settling on her shoulders. Then we'll review hundreds, however long it takes. Marcus turned one last time to the remaining people in the courtroom. This is what justice looks like when it works, he said. Not quick, not easy, not clean, but necessary. Then he walked out, not with triumph, but with resolve. The camera held on the empty bench, the ragged coat still resting on the wooden rail. A symbol. Not of deception, but of what someone would endure to bring truth to light. This wasn't about one officer, one precinct, one shove. This was about what happens when someone finally refuses to let power hide behind a badge and says, enough. Real justice doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It doesn't seek attention or acclaim. It simply does what must be done, even when no one is watching. Like Agent Williams, we don't need to wear our authority to make a difference. But when we witness wrong, we must act. Because justice doesn't begin in courthouses. It doesn't start with lawyers or judges or agents. It begins with people who refuse to look away,